Welcome to another edition of the Mexican Soccer Show. I'm your host, Cesar Hernandez, and today we're going to dive into Mexico's roster and the upcoming Nations League matches as our big talking point of the day. We're also going to dive into a little CONCACAF Champions. We're going to talk about Johan Vasquez, a little Liga MX, and alongside me, we'll start with the first of my two co-hosts. It's Nayib Moran. Nayib, how are you doing today, man? Welcome back again. Another big welcome back.
Another
Yeah, man.
week of exciting times. Not so exciting in Monterrey. Half of Monterrey is quite sad today as we record this. But good to see Lizzy. Good to meet you, Lizzy, and look forward on chatting with you about the Mexican game and sharing our thoughts on where this is heading. With El Tri playing big games in this March. In a couple of days, basically.
And like Nayib said there, we also have the other co-host, I was to say Nayib again, Lizzy Becherano, my usual co-host returning to the pod. How are you doing, Lizzy? How's Miami?
It's good. We're back up and running. Messi is playing and not playing. We are here for it all. So back to normality.
Here for it, but here in the U.S., they're not having you stationed in Jamaica, right? That would have been pretty cool if you were recording this from Jamaica ahead of that game. But
yeah, unfortunately not. We will be covering tonight's game remotely, but still, as close as can be, given chaos.
Well, Lizzy seems to be in the capital of soccer in America right now.
Yes,
Which is
100%.
Yeah, everything's coming to town.
Well, we got plenty to talk about today. So let's kick things off with our big talking point, Mexico's roster and the upcoming Nations League matches. So for those of you who don't know, we've got a CONCACAF Nations League semifinals and the final and third place match as well. So the semis are on March 20th. Mexico will be going up against Canada, and then the final is on the 23rd. So in the lead up to that game, Mexico released their 23-man roster. I'm not going to name all the names because that'll take another few minutes. You can look it up. You can pull it up right now. You can Google it. You'll be able to find it. But that's a big talk point. And Nayib, I'm going to start with you. So looking at this list, what was your immediate reaction when you're looking at this roster?
He's playing it safe. No, I think Vasco with his experience and, with Rafa besides him, he's going with experience in this list. I think it's very close to what we will see in the World Cup. I dare say that maybe 4 or 5 switches, maybe possible new inclusions in the list in 2026. But this is as close as it gets to the final World Cup roster. It is one of those things where there is a lot of pressure. This is a title that El Tri has never, celebrated. But it also is very critical in the sense that, it's different times now. It's not how it used to be 10 years ago, where, heading into a tournament of this sort, El Tri was the favorite 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, I feel that the interpretation is that they are the underdog. They are the underdog against Canada. They are the underdog against the US. So it's that interpretation of, you live from the past, of course, because it's Mexico and Mexico has won so many gold cups and everything. But it's no longer that feeling when you look at the rosters of the other teams and you compare it to Mexico's. But I think that one of the keys right now is assembling starting 11 that will really, really resonate with Vasco and Rafa, but also resonate with the fan base. And if they can see themselves represented adequately on the field. So, he put experience there. He put some youngsters like Efrain Alvarez, but that's about it. No, it's a very, very experience in a way with World Cups and whatnot. And that's excluding the fact that Ochoa's not even on the list. So it still has some experience.
Yeah, Lizzy, your thoughts on all that? Because Nayib brings a lot of good points there regarding Ochoa, regarding, when I'm looking at this roster here too, if I'm looking at the options from January that really stood out, I mean, Efrain Alvarez is definitely the one, stands a little bit, maybe Ramon Juarez, but your thoughts on this roster and, your immediate reaction when you saw the 23 come out?
My immediate reaction was okay. I didn't react in a particularly expressive manner just because I like that word safe, but I also understand that a statement was made. We've transitioned past Memo Ochoa, which I think is great. I respect everything he's done for the national team. I respect all the dedication, but I think being left out of this roster was an important step forward for the team, especially considering building group, building morale. Goalkeeper situation is quite interesting because being such a tight knit group, you're training separately, you're in a category of your own, and not having Ochoa there really lets these new young figures develop a personality of their own. So I thought that was a great move by Javier Aguirre. Again, I wasn't necessarily surprised, but I think it was an important statement that was made. That's why I kind of like the word safe. I would have included probably Obed Vargas or a couple young figures that have also been doing well, but I was okay with the roster as a whole. I think Nations League is an interesting tournament. I don't really think it means much. I don't think it really means anything at all. I appreciate the fact that in the past we've won all Gold Cups, and so that's why we've been favorites. I think it's only beneficial to Mexico that the competition in CONCACAF continues to improve. The more competition with the United States, the more competition with Canada, the more our level can rise, because there's no fun in constantly winning yourself. There's no competition. You're always winning.
Yeah.
That's great. And trophies are phenomenal, and sure. But if these can be real tests for Mexico and they don't win the title, that's great. I guess this is more for experience leading up to the World Cup, given that we've already qualified. We don't have qualifiers. We don't have bigger challenges. So if Javier Aguirre wants to go experimental on the starting 11 or test new techniques or anything like that, I'm all for it. If that means losing, okay.
I think that's also really interesting. Some points you made right there. I'm going to actually go back to really quickly to the goalkeeper position, if we want to talk about that really quickly. I like that Aguirre did this, but my guess is that more than likely he told Ochoa, "You're not out of the picture. Let me check out these three options. You're still in the running, obviously, for the next World Cup, and like Ochoa has not obviously ruled that out either. He still wants to play the next World Cup. That's still in his mind. He still wants to make history there. The way that I see it in my brain is that I think Ochoa is still going to be at the World Cup. I think Malagon's going to be at the World Cup, but I think right now we're seeing maybe behind the scenes a battle for the third goalkeeper. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know what either of you have to say about that. And maybe right now the leading third goalkeeper is Rangel and Moreno. The other options, I don't know.
It's an interesting topic that you bring, Cesar. I mean, is it the case that Ochoa is willing to go to a World Cup without being the starter? Like, you know what? Is he willing to accept not being the number one goalkeeper? Because that's how it's looking right now. It's like, I don't want to. If I'm not gonna be number one, I'm not gonna be in the roster at all.
100%. And I think that's the thought that came into my mind, especially during, the October friendlies when he was called up, but he didn't play. So I think that same conversation was had then. And if at that point he accepted a role playing as a backup goalkeeper, then I think he would have been called for this tournament as well and continuously throughout the World Cup. I guess I saw it completely differently in that conversation was had. Ochoa wasn't necessarily, and I don't want to start a conspiracy. I don't want to say he's against El Vasco. I don't want to say he didn't agree with what was said by any means, but I think a part of him wants to continue fighting for that starting role, and that's not necessarily in the works at the moment. So I think that's why not including him was probably a statement. Otherwise, we know that anytime Mexico calls, Ochoa answers. So it would be unusual for him not to be there.
And this is not to say that, for example, the relationship between Ochoa and Malagon is very strong. No, Malagon speaks highly of Ochoa. And I think that, Ochoa is well aware that Malagon has done his work to deserve the number one role. and now it's all his. No, it's a situation that is very critical because there's stuff on the line, and that's where you test, what are his capabilities. We've seen in the past 2 weeks, I'd say, the influence of goalkeepers. Just in the Champions League, for example, Courtois. In the first leg between Liverpool and PSG, Alisson did amazing. So the goalkeeper is still an important position in a team.
Right.
And as we have seen in the past in World Cups, 2014, 2018, 2022, if Ochoa's not there, I don't know if El Tri actually has some, impeccable performance in those World Cups. At the end of the day, he won man of the match in multiple games in those 3 World Cups. It's not like he was like, just a dude on the goal. No, so it's a very, very complex situation without a doubt.
100%. And that also brings up a good point for, all right, we brought up Ochoa there. Who else stood out to you? Maybe I'll go to you, Lizzy. When you look at this roster and you're like, why wasn't this player on the roster? I mean, you can bring up Obed Vargas again because that was someone who stood out to me. But I guess what I will say regarding the players who were left out for me, I was like, where's Elias Montiel? Where's Obed Vargas? I'm like, well, they're included in the U20 roster. So maybe there's something there with that's how they want to transition them in. Maybe you could bring up a Henry Martin. I think you texted me that while you're working on a certain user the other day. So yeah, and so what stands out to you?
I did. I appreciate the fact that the younger players were called to the U20 squads. Again, this tournament is not that important to me. So if they're called for the U20 squads and are being seen by the national team, that's great. That's enough. Phenomenal. Yeah, Henry Martin, I think, was left out. But it's hard because I don't think he necessarily fits in this roster. Like, I wouldn't replace him for anybody. But he's just been so good for Club America so many times consistently that it feels a bit of a snub. But at the same time, I mean, you're at most and at times you're playing with 2 strikers. You're not going to play.
It's 2 games.
If 2. Realistically, you're going to play with 1. So I don't know.
Nayib, I'll throw it to you.
Not enough.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw it to you. Who do you feel like is missing out here? Maybe it could be Henry Martin, but I agree with Lizzy there. It's just,
I mean,
it's 2 games.
It's 2 games. Also, when you look at the goals tally of Julian, of Santi, and Raúl is impeccable. No, even if Julian is in Saudi Arabia, so and you got to figure out if they complement each other. If there is that, we talked in the last show about will Santi and Raúl play together, or if it's the case of just one of them with Julian Quiñones. Because a lot has been said in the last hours that Julian plays a lot that role like he did in Atlas, and playing behind Forge. And so you think about that, you're like, okay, so that means if Julian starts, it's either Santi or Raúl. It can be Raúl, Santi, and Julian. So it's going to be interesting to see if Javier gives that role to Quiñones as, okay, you're going to start, and you're going to start alongside either or Raúl or Santi. No, which, a lot of people want to see the Santi Raúl. But like I said, right now, Julian, with how he's playing with Aubameyang over there in Saudi Arabia, it's an attractive idea, no? And in terms of surprises, if someone was left out, Cesar, I think the list is safe, no? And you could have added a Marcel Ruiz, and like Lizzy says, a Obed Vargas for experience. But I think, at the end of the day, it seems that Efrain Alvarez won the race. Efrain Alvarez technically is over someone like Diego Lainez. That Lainez already has played for the senior national team, and it just says a lot that he did his work. Efrain did his work in that tour in South America.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Efrain's in there too, because those games in South America, and I really hope that there are more games like that going forward. I know a lot of that was because of scheduling and certain players were available and it was not a FIFA date, but he really impressed me there. There are a handful of players actually that really impressed me there. So I'm glad to see that he's in the running. But also I want to bring up, actually, I want to talk about what you talked about there about Quiñones, because let's say, okay, if he is going to start, and I'll be honest, out of all these players in the list, he's the one that I've seen the least because
Yeah.
I look at the stats. I look at the
highlights too.
Yeah, I look at the highlights. I have no idea
Yes, okay.
how it's going out there. Like, but like, so would we would Aguirre be willing to switch his system to a 5-3-2? Because it has to be a 5, right? Is that something you have to do just to complement him? But I don't know. Maybe he's done enough the homework there and been like, you know what? Quinones is killing it out there. It has to be this new system because I feel like he has to stick with like a 4-3-3, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying here is I have my doubts, and I even have my doubts. We don't have to talk about the starting 11 just yet. I'm looking at my at a possible starting 11, but I'm like, Alexis Vega has been killing it with the Luca. You know, I feel like he might be done with El Tri, and yet he still keeps spreading these goals and assists. Maybe he gets to start, and then there's Huerta on the other side. So I don't know. Your thoughts on a possible 11 here, and whether that would include a Quinones or it could change the formation for El Tri.
What are you thinking, Lizzy?
Lots of things, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts because mumbo jumbo in my head.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. This, about the back line of 5, and because we assume that a back line of 5 is defensive, but maybe that just gives us stability, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Diego Coca, when he coached, because at the end of the day, Julian Quinones is not in Mexico's national team without Diego Coca. No, it kind of still it's part of the whole story, and so when Diego Coca came over, of course, the Nations League burned him down and they fired him. But he talked a lot about, playing with a backline of 5. He was trying to reintegrate that into the team. Coca being a student of La Volpe. And so that's part of it. And also now you got Rafa, who's also kind of a student of La Volpe, no? And he played that backline of 5. And when you think about the back line of 5 with La Volpe, it wasn't defensive. It was actually offensive. It gave stability to the team. The thing is you got to find the right mix to actually pull it off. No, the right center backs, the right wing backs also have to be very, very important. I actually, do see a midfield of, for example, Edson and Chavez with Vega as the quote unquote more 10 role. You would say a little bit how Ciña played it when La Volpe was coaching the team. So Vega's there, and then Quiñones and Raúl, or Quiñones or Santi. But right now, based on the experience that Raúl offers, and you can't ignore it. I mean, it's just he's doing so good in Fulham that I just, it's the best league in the world. And I know that Santi is in Milan and he's scoring. Lately he hasn't, but that's gonna play the experience that Raul has and the league he's in just automatically makes him the starter. And then also what he did against the US in that friendly in Guadalajara was phenomenal, no? So just finding the right complement. Maybe the complement is not Julian. Maybe the complement is Santi and Raul. We'll find out. I mean, it's something that I think is still in the works.
You know who would be listening to this, smiling, is Tata, the number one fan of the 5 at the back line. So I think he's just hearing us speak and was like, I told you guys, a line of 5 works. I just had him my thoughts. But no, regarding Santi, I call it the Jimenez debacle. Jimenez versus Jimenez. I completely agree. I would prioritize Raul over Santi, which I know is a heated topic. Everyone has thoughts on the situation. One, really, there's no mid take here. Everything's a hot take, whether it's 2, whether it's 1 or the other. I would prioritize building off of Raul's strength and then going backwards.
It's an interesting question to have because we also have to be realistic with how Santi has been with the national team. I know he's had injuries, so he hasn't always had the opportunity to be there for every single opportunity there for El Tri, but I was thinking about it and I was like, yeah, when was the last time he scored? And I was like, oh, that's right. It was back in 2023 in the Gold Cup. I know it's going to be at SoFi Stadium, so maybe there's something there. Maybe it'll kind of I know it could give him an opportunity to prove himself again at that stadium. But yeah, when you're looking at what Raul Jimenez is doing in the league that he's in, and how he's really stepped up, it's a tough one. I honestly, I don't have an answer as to who I would rather start there, but
And
I think that whoever, go ahead,
the assumption of Santi starting over Raul was always on the idea that, oh, let's work for the future, no, and sort of someone else needs to take the baton in the striker position. But right now with Vasco, Aguirre, and Rafa, losing to Canada won't look good, So
Right.
they have to be very careful. This is, of course, you gotta think about the future, but you got the World Cup next year, and you don't want to be eliminated in a group stage with three teams. No, it is that serious right now. So the conundrum lies on the idea that yeah, you want to work for the future, but you got to win now because El Tri hasn't won anything in the last years, and I think that's where Raul gets the upper hand over Santi, I think.
Could we say that, because I have right here on one of my notes about like which player has the most to prove in this upcoming window. I think if Santi does get the start, he's probably number one on that list. If he does get the start, I think 100% the person who has the most to prove. But regarding that conversation, is there any other? And I'll go to you, Lizzy. Here, is there any other player here that you look at that could possibly be a starter, or maybe they're maybe on the outside looking in, but someone who really has a lot to prove within this international window?
Yes, and I'll say Malagon, but more
Okay.
so proving to himself. I don't
Mhm.
think he has to prove himself among the coaching staff or the fans. I think a lot of them love him. He's won a lot of people over, but it's a very big position, and I know he stepped up to the challenge of the pressure that is being a figure for Club America. I mean, you're one of, if not the most hated Liga MX team in the country. You're constantly like being taunted at, and he's risen up to the pressure quite well. I mean, he mocks, he jokes, he like laughs about it at all, and he's a great leader and a great villain. But the pressure of the national team, I think, is a little bit different. So if he can be up for the position, he has to prove that to himself first and then enact it with confidence in every single match. Again, the shoes are big to fill.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that capacity-wise and technique-wise, he can fill them. But being that it's such a mental position, he has to win that battle internally first to then be able to declare it. In terms of Santi, Cesar, you know this. I hate the pressure that's been put on this one poor player that is so ridiculous to me, because you don't from day to night become a national team hero, especially in the conditions that the Mexican national team are right now, where there's no qualifiers, there's no big challenge, there's no grand spotlight. But these tournaments, Gold Cup, Nations League, if you win, who cares? If you lose, biggest thing in the world. So there's no winning scenario for Santi in that sense. And you just can't be an overnight sensation. And so I think it's a slow build, it's a slow burn, and he's not being given that grace. And so I hate putting that kind of pressure on him. I also don't think getting the last 30 minutes of a random semifinal game against Canada is going to give you the stage and the platform that he'll need to prove himself. So for me, it's Malagon. I think it'll be difficult for Santi to prove himself from here to the World Cup.
Yeah, Nayib, your thoughts on that, whether it be Santi, Malagon, or the player that you feel like has anybody else that comes to mind? Someone
I
has.
feel, I want two players that stand out is in the midfield, Charlie
Yeah.
Rodriguez and Orbelin Pineda. I don't know if they're going to
Yeah.
be starters or if they're
Yeah.
going to get minutes. It's up to Vasco. But those two players have had many minutes with the national team, with the senior
Yeah.
team, especially since 2022 up to now. And I really haven't seen matches where they've been very influential. I dare to say that I've seen more games of Linus being influential with the national team than those two. And I
Yeah.
understand that Charlie, he does very impeccable in Cruz Azul, even scored a goal in the CONCACAF Champions against, what was the team against Seattle? So he plays well with Cruz Azul, but it doesn't translate into the national team. And the same goes with Orbelin Pineda. I don't know if they put him out of position. I don't know if it's the pressure, because of course, let's remember in the Copa America against Venezuela, I believe he missed a PK. The pressure just ate him up in that moment. So those two players, if they are considered to be in the World Cup roster, they have to show something. Because if they don't show anything in these games, especially if they start, or play in these next two games, let us hope it's two games, the final. But I think, if they don't do anything now, I mean, I don't see a point in keeping them in the process. No, they like Lizzy says, Obed Vargas could potentially be a player to consider. Montiel, another one, Marcel Ruiz. So there's a good pack of young midfielders that could potentially take their place if they're not gonna do anything worthwhile in the next weeks.
I like that answer too, because they're the classic example of players who, in my mind, I'm like, they're still in my mind. I know they're not, but I still think it's like, oh, they're that 23-year-old midfielder who could still live up to like the potential that we want them to live up to. They're gonna get better, but they're now at a point in their careers just like where they're at is where they're at, and we had higher expectations for them, and maybe that's also part of why I feel a little disappointed with their, I guess we could say, inconsistencies, and maybe that's more so for Charlie. I guess we could say maybe more than Orbelin, although with Orbelin, like Quinones, sometimes it's tough to watch.
And nothing wrong. I like the dance. I like the dance with Orbelin and everything.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I love it. I love it. But
who
we gotta
loves
speak the truth. It's not working out with the national team sometimes.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, that's also like it's kind of tied into my, like, when I was looking at this roster when it came out, I was looking at the defense, like, okay, that makes sense. Goalkeepers make sense. Okay, forwards, and then I'm not gonna lie, like I looked at the midfield, and yes, I could look at it, Edson and Alita, and be like, and that, like, and to an extent, Luis Chavez. But even with Chavez, I mean, when I'm coupling in there Orbelin and Charlie and Romo, I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel excited. I don't really feel that thrilled by it. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong, but I think it's in what you were talking about there, Nayib, where it's just with Orbelin, are they playing him in the right position? Should he be more so of a true number 10? Should be playing better as like if he
we've
was
seen
a
him in a lot
winger?
of places. We've actually seen him in the wing. We've seen him as an interior midfielder. A lot of the times I go back to Almeida's Chivas, and the pair that he did, the partnership he did with Gallito Vasquez. And that was Orbelin that was deeper. That's a deep midfield role. And I haven't
how he
seen that
started.
much.
I think that's how he started too. I think we're back in his, was it with Querétaro? I forgot. But when he was playing, I think he was more sort of like a deeper kind of like kind of almost like a defensive midfielder. And like, yeah, I guess I have a lot of questions along the midfield, and I agree with what you said there, where it's just I think that they have an immense amount to prove because they're not the young kids anymore. They're not, they're not 19, 20, 21, 22. You got to be thinking about the future. And if they don't really step up here, yeah, maybe somebody from the U20s is really going to take their spot. And I would not at all be surprised by that.
Gil Mora, another kid, the one in Cholos too, he can, I don't see a problem if he was included in this list,
Gil Mora is still an actual literal kid, an actual kid. But I think that leads me to my next question here. We'll go to Lizzy for this one. You look at this roster, think about possible starting 11s. Who do you think that the surprise player is going to be, and who's going to really step up next week for Mexico?
I don't think there's going to be a surprise player. I don't think there's going to be.
That's fair.
I just don't think.
That's fair.
I think we've seen enough of these players, with the exception of.
Usually, you're so optimistic. Why?
I really am. I know. It's something.
Some sudden pessimism.
Pessimism
from you.
I know. I went a little bit more north these past 2 weeks. It must be the water. The tap is a little more negative. Usually, I'm like the most optimistic person in the world. Echando porras where maybe there shouldn't be, but no, I don't know. I think like we are past that stage where a player is considered a surprise at this point, and we used safe to describe this roster. We used experience to describe this roster. So I think we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly from these players in the past, that like nothing would be a surprise anymore. Like if they have great games, we'll cheer, but we shouldn't be surprised. Whereas if they have bad games, we've also seen that. So I'm not necessarily thrilled or like eager to see something different, potentially with Efra, given that he was given this opportunity, though I don't think we'll see him on the field that much or enough for us to be satisfied with said surprise. Yeah, like I'm feeling various positive things towards the Nations League matches, but I don't anticipate a surprise, unfortunately.
I'm gonna step here. I guess I'm answering my own question here, and I'm curious to hear Nayib's thoughts. But I think Vasquez is a decent shout. He's getting a number of consistent appearances for Copenhagen. He got a goal in the conference league. I know it's a conference league, but whatever.
But
Like he like, it was an important moment for his career. Like he has experience playing against Chelsea twice. I watched the first half of him earlier today. I was pretty impressed. It could have been terrible. The second half could have been terrible. That I didn't watch, and maybe it was like an absolute abysmal performance the second half. But I don't know, when I'm looking at the starting 11, when I see the other right backs that are missing and absent, I'm looking at this thinking like there's a decent chance that he's going to get in the starting 11 here.
There's no Jorge Sanchez, there's no Kevin Alvarez. So it's for the taking.
Araujo's injured, and then like Israel Reyes could possibly play there, but like I don't know, maybe if it was a back three. But Nayib, your thoughts, like whether it be on Vasquez or maybe someone else.
It's very interesting that you bring Huesca's name up, and a lot of things have happened. I wouldn't say in the last months or so since Anselmi left to Porto, and the fashion that he left to Porto. It was, I was a bit sad in a way, because I personally feel when you look at this roster, there is an Anselmi influence. Huescas, Lira, Romo, players that played under him in that Cruz Azul side that won a lot of points, but didn't win anything in the Liguilla, of course. And so I personally think, and I don't know if he's going to start or not, but Eric Lira, the way that he moves because he can be a midfielder, but he can also be a defender. And it depends really how the team will be shaped, no? So Lira could be a surprise, in my opinion, even though he doesn't have that youth or anything. I mean, I think he's still 24 or something, but he is a player that, like, for example, Efrain Alvarez took advantage of the tour in South America. Two players, defenders, Ramon Juarez and also Israel Reyes, they come from this team that won 3 league titles. So it is El Tricampeonato. So will they play? And that puts into question, will Montes start? Because Montes hasn't played that much this year in Russia. I think the same can be said about Chavez, the winter season and all that stuff. So that's something to keep in mind, is how well are those players to get in that scenario, of a must-win scenario. And I don't know if Montes is going to be ready. And that means that someone like Ramon Juarez or Israel Reyes might need to step up and take that role. So like Lizzy says, I mean, it's difficult to pinpoint, it could be a Chino Huerta too, maybe. It could be considered a surprise, not so much because he already played, but, depending on the role he has, considering Chucky's not present, there was a possibility that he could have been present, but he got injured in San Diego. So it's like Huescas. Right now, there's really no direct competition for Huescas in this roster. The same can be said for Chino Huerta. There's not really someone there. Maybe Julian Quiñones, maybe, but I feel Chino is that disruptor on the wing, no? That he likes the wing, and there's not that many players that Mexico has in this roster. I mean, there's no Antuna, there's no Chucky, players that were disruptors in the wing, and now it's all Chino right now.
100%, yeah. Although maybe Piojo could possibly play there, but I think that what if with his chaotic energy, which I absolutely love to watch. I'm going to say he's probably one of the most entertaining players out there, but he just has to channel that energy at the right moments more than any other Mexican player. But actually, speaking of that, I think maybe it'd be good to. I mean, we don't have to dive deep into details of every single position, but I'd be curious to hear each of your best starting. Your ideal, maybe we could say even your ideal starting 11. We could start with you, Nate. When you're looking at this roster, what comes to mind about a possible ideal starting 11 for Mexico in the upcoming 2 games? Because there will be 2 games, because win or lose, they'll be playing either a final or a third place game.
The third place game, right? One crazy idea I have, so we'll put it here. It's gonna be on record, and then people can bird me or whatever. But let's put it out there. Malagon as a goalkeeper. Backline of the 3 central defenders: Reyes, Juarez, and Johan.
Okay.
Huescas on the right, Gallardo on the left, Edson, Chavez, Vega in the midfield, Quiñones, and Raul Jimenez.
So you're doing a 3-5-2. Okay, I like that. I mean, that's not bad. And then obviously with Canada, it's gonna be tough with with some of those forward options they have. That's not a bad one. I don't know. I don't know if you suddenly try a new tactical approach right there, especially because I know Lizzy was saying to her that this isn't the turn might not be that important to her. I personally think it is pretty important for Mexico at this point, because I think it's, I mean, that could be a different conversation too, but it's their last big official thing with all their players, because I know there's a Gold Cup as well, but we'll see who's available.
And I think it's yeah, I mean, and I love I love starting 11, sure, but I'm very interested in that sense, because I don't think it's about to apply the 2000s. It's not about the result, it's how we got there.
The true Nations League were the friendships you made along the way.
No, literally. No, but I think for me that's the sense, and that it's not necessarily important in there's a huge validity or importance to the trophy. This tournament isn't important in the sense that if
Mexico, but they haven't won it. They haven't won it yet. And just
but I mean, in my mind, it's okay, who cares? It's the same idea that in the past we won so many Gold Cups. Who cares? For example, with CONCACAF qualifiers, they're important because if you don't win, you don't get to the World Cup.
Right.
This trophy doesn't give you anything more than, if anything, bragging rights or some sort of merit, because the idea that this will hold fans over lasts all but 10 minutes when there's a shift to continuous preparation for the World Cup. And there's no easing of any nerves for the World Cup because, again, a Nations League is not telling of anything in the future. Bringing up the past, the Gold Cup triumphs weren't telling of how we did at this tournament. So I think it's more important in the sense that Vasco Aguirre can test players, test formation, test leadership, the chemistry in the locker room. All these things I think are important to test in a competition standpoint, more so than friendlies. But in terms of if we don't win, that means XYZ. If we don't win, but we played a phenomenal match and we're unlucky because we hit the post 35 times, okay, work on that. But winning a measly 1-0 with a penalty would mean less to me than a phenomenal match that we were very unlucky in. I know that is the hot take. I understand a lot of people don't feel that way. I get it. I understand. I'm not with everyone, but
so I'm curious. So with that in mind, with that in mind, that maybe you could afford to do a little bit something different. What would your 11 be? If I don't know if you're ever in doubt, I could do my own 11 first. I don't know. What would your 11 be?
Yeah. Or Cesar, you go, or Lizzy?
Yeah, please, because
Yeah.
I think for me, I don't know. I think I stick with the 4-3-3.
Okay.
I think you got to keep Malagon in net. I'm left back. I'm not entirely sure who should be a start there, but I think I'll stick with Gallardo. I think you got to stick with Vasquez and Montes in the middle defense. Huescas at right back, and then the midfield. My doubts, but yeah, it's gonna obviously Edson. That's not a doubt right there. That's obviously a guarantee. And then above them, Chavez, and then Orbelin. And then the front line, I'm gonna do Quiñones, Santi, and Huerta. I think to me,
Oh, Santi starts with Cesar.
I know. I think I'm giving him that moment. Just I think you gotta. I think you gotta put the trust on him right there. I think, and maybe there's a symbolism right there of playing at SoFi Stadium, and you think, okay, like you had your last and only big moment for Old Three, when it came to goal scoring was at this exact venue back in 2023, and maybe try to like give him that opportunity in that sense. I'm saying that thinking that maybe it should be Raul, but who knows? But I think that at this moment that's the best 11, and maybe the only real experiment there is you could say Santi over Raul, but I don't know. And Lizzy, your thoughts on what you would do? Would you change that? Would you do what Naib's doing with like a 3-5-2? I'm curious.
See, what I want and what I think are going to happen are two wildly different things. It's what I've come to understand in my head. I think we'll likely see that 4-3-3, but I would want a 5-2-1-2.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fascinating.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So I think it'd be Malagon, obviously. Huesca, Reyes, Montes, Vasquez, Gallardo, Edson, Romo, Vega,
Okay. Yeah.
Jimenez.
Oh,
It's an
yeah,
interesting one there.
that
You
that
went
that
with
that
Romo and Edson
Mm-hmm.
in the
that's
midfield.
not a bad one either. That's not a bad one
But
either.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's what's going to happen. I want to clarify, like, expectations and reality are not aligned in this case.
But I think that also brings up an interesting thing here with what Lizzy, like the expectation Lizzy has, what she was thinking with that formation, what I was expecting, what Nayib's talking about, and maybe we'll go with you, Nayib, because we got like another like 5 minutes left here on this talking point. But with all that in mind, like it's does Mexico need to win the nations? I know that sounds like a very dumb question, but like
No.
can like what is, I guess my question, and I wrote down like, what is success, right? I think that Lizzy talked about
Success es que las formas cuentan. The forms matter. The style matters. O sea, the what the team evokes. No,
Yes.
because the reason Coca got fired is because the way that the team looked in the final against the US, it was pathetic. It was
That was a
pathetic.
bad
The
one.
way that
That
just
was a bad
they
one.
gave up. No, and at least with what we want to see with Vasco, this is his third time as a Mexico manager. It's not the first time he's coaching El Tri. You got Rafa involved now. You got to see a very, very intense, focused, team that is propositivo, that they actually go out there and try to win the game. Those are going to matter. Doesn't matter if they win it or not, but the style, the forms are going to be very, very important. If the team lacks that, you can say, well, that's what we have. No, a lot of right now, the last hours in Monterrey is, the players are at fault. No, it's the players and every. It could be the same thing with Mexico if they lose against Canada. The players, it's always the players. They're not improving and whatnot. But we'll see right now. I think that Vasco returned for a reason. Marquez left an opportunity in Europe. Right now he could be coaching Monaco or in Belgium or even Porto, and he decided to come back to Mexico. So hopefully they make something out of it and they can actually give a good performance, at least the crowd satisfied.
I completely 100% agree.
Like
1 million%.
All right, and just to close things up here before we move on to our smaller talking points, but really quickly, predictions. I'll start with mine. After all of that we said, I think Mexico narrowly surpasses Canada. It's going to be a tough one. It might even go down to penalties. And then I think they lose in the end to the U.S. in the final. The U.S. lifts it again. I would not be surprised if that happens. Lizzy, your thoughts? I don't have quick predictions here about how it's going to go after everything we just said all there.
I think it's 2-1 Mexico versus Canada, and I think it's 1-1 against the United States. Mexico wins in penalties.
Oh, okay. Nayib, your thoughts?
Shoot, Lizzy went specific, man.
She did. Yes, she did get specific.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm gonna be a bit lame. I'll just say el equipo va a jugar bonito. The team's gonna play nice.
Okay.
And you know,
Okay.
I that's how I see.
I hope.
I see it. You know, I do feel that the team is recuperating some type of attitude that it lacked several years ago, and I think with what he has now, we'll see a massive improvement. Let us hope.
Okay.
That's how I leave it.
Okay.
You sound like the intro to Liga MX. Juega limpio. Siéntate. That's all I love that intro.
All right, let's move on to our quick updates and thoughts now. Just to wrap up the show, let's see if we can hit these 3 topics and just try to do 5 minutes each. First one, we'll get Lizzy right here. So far, from what we've seen, still obviously have a lot more to go in this competition, but lessons from the Liga MX performances that you've seen in the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
I think Liga MX was extremely telling of how these teams were going to perform in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, with the very random exception of Chivas beating El America in that first leg of that series. I think the second match was a lot more telling of what they have been performing. Monterrey also shouldn't have been such a shock. This is how they've been playing. This is how they've been this tournament. Thinking otherwise would have brought previous bias into Liga MX Giants dominating over MLS matches. I don't think that was in actuality the reality for Monterrey. And I did call it a big shock yesterday. Mulling it over 24 hours later, it doesn't come as such big of a shock. Otherwise, everything happened as it should have been. Nothing too surprising. Club America dominating 4-0 last night was as expected. And now the same thing happens again with Cruz Azul, where it's like CONCACAF, Liga MX, CONCACAF. Too many clásicos.
Yeah, I like that though. I think I did call it like a fracaso with what happened to Rayados, but that's not the only fracaso that they've had in recent years, right? It's just like, big investment, nice infrastructure. Things haven't really worked out since their last title in any competition in 2021. So I guess I'm not that surprised. But for me, it's huge credit to MLS's Vancouver for being the exception so far this year. But I think although MLS has grown, it's still tough for those teams. And I think a lot of it has to do with the roster mechanisms that you see in MLS for those teams to keep up with the Cruz Azul, to keep up with the Tigres. And who knows, maybe in the end, Miami might lift it in the end. There's still a very good chance that that's going to happen, but it's tough. It's tough for those MLS teams. And what happens is you will see some of those Liga MX powerhouses surpassing them. But yeah, Nayib, your thoughts on what we've seen so far?
I think Lizzy summarized it great. I mean, it's that notion of at the end of the day, there's more. The roster is more stacked in Liga MX, but the Liga MX sides, and that kind of gives them a little bit of an advantage. MLS teams are still kind of adapting of going to Mexico because they don't do it often. And I think they got to sort of, it's something that it's ingrained with experience. No, it's you repeat it many times and then you get better at it. I think Vancouver was surprising. I mean, they've been the surprise in MLS. I mean, they're still undefeated in MLS play. And recently their striker Brian White got called up by Mauricio Pochettino to the national team, and it's a stacked national team, and for an MLSer to get called up means a lot. It says a lot about the player and about where he's coming from. I think it's a big hit for Monterrey. I don't know what they're going to do in the next hours. It could be very, very huge. They might just fire the Michelis in the next hours or so as we record this, so we'll find out. But it's very, very... They put la vara muy alta. Like when they brought in Sergio Ramos, They was like, okay, this is it. This is the last piece to the puzzle that we had. We're going for it, and the team just didn't play for. It didn't look the part for the how high the stakes were, how high the optimism was, and so it's culpa compartida, or like both the players and also the coaching staff, because I don't feel the Micheli. I feel the coaching staff is too young for that sort of roster. You need a very experienced manager to deal with that roster.
You're saying
It could have been Vucetich. It's like when you see Real Madrid with Ancelotti.
Right.
Ancelotti has so much experience that he's able to manage all those egos. And I feel that the Michelis just couldn't handle all those egos in Monterrey, and that's why it happened when it happened.
Okay. Yeah. No. Good point there. Good point there. And let's move on now to the second of our third small topics here. I want to bring up Johan Vasquez, his great run, the recent rumors. I mean, collecting Man of the Match award, scoring twice since January. No lack of rumors regarding the general player who's been linked with a number of bigger clubs. I'll go to you, Lizzy, on this. Thoughts on him? Thoughts on his future? Just anything about this player who, like, it's funny because, like, it's always so much easier to focus on the goal scorers and the guys who are creating plays, who are providing assists, and making those headlines. But like, he's been impressive. I remember it must have been, was it in late 2024 when we recorded? I was like telling the listeners, like, watch a Genoa game, and it's impressive. He's not only doing well, but he's directing players. He's like telling them where to go. So I don't know your thoughts on Johan Vasquez.
I think it's long overdue. I think he's been consistently at this level for a while, and now people are noticing, and not just fans, but scouts and the staff of other teams. So I'm very proud that he's finally like receiving the gratification that he deserves. And I hope the rumors to bigger European teams continue, because I think those rumors, if anything, fuel a player and their confidence. And so having him understand that he has something to prove to scouts and a coaching staff of other European teams on the national stage, on the international stage, will only make him a better player. So yeah, kudos to him. We've long seen it coming. So no real surprise there, but for a defensive player to get noticed the way that he has, and for a defensive player to perform as he has, very proud.
Yeah. Now your thoughts on Johan Vasquez. Yeah.
With Johan, the other day I was talking with Raul, the colorful kid, and he brought up this idea or this stat that he has more league minutes in Italy now than he ever had in Liga MX. Wow. So what does this say?
Really? That's how long he's been there. Wow.
Yeah. So this is what this says, about the formation of the footballer, because I feel like, as a lot of analysts in Mexico, and we tend to belittle the player, like, the Mexican player is not good enough to be there, or the Mexican player not good enough, no? And Johan is an example that he waited for his moment. He got the loan to Pumas, took advantage of playing in Pumas, took the risk, and went to Italy, and look at now what's going on. So how many Johan Vasquez exist in Mexico? Many, the tens, I'm pretty sure. So that just goes to show you that the level of the Mexican player is capable to play in the best leagues in the world. And how do we facilitate players of that sort to go to Europe as soon as possible? Because you see that growth, like Cesar was saying. This guy is directing Italian defenders and Italian players, which is crazy to think about. So it is a remarkable story, but it's also a testament that if you shoot high, you can make it. And the Mexican player has a lot of potential and a lot of capabilities to play in the best leagues in the world.
Or actually, you know what? I'm going to say really quickly, I agree with everything you just said there, except for the shoot high. Because you know what? Shoot at a modest level. Don't shoot for the Premier League. Don't shoot for La Liga. Shoot for, let's look at Jurado recently. Like earlier today, it was only like 10 minutes. Whatever. He played Conference League minutes because he went to Belgium. Let's look at Vasquez. He's right now, we were talking about him possibly being a starter here for Mexico, and this was after his chance to move to Scandinavia, and we saw all of the drama between like him and Cruz Azul to like do that opportunity. We're looking at what he's doing in Belgium. Like, I think that I hope to see more players doing that Johan Vasquez route, where it's just like, yeah, it's not gonna be the biggest, most beautiful club, but like make those gradual steps, see what's happening in Belgium, see what's happening in the Netherlands, see what there's opportunities there, and it doesn't have to. Like I said, I agree with everything you said there, Nayib, except doesn't have to be shooting for not everybody. Not everybody can beat Chicharito and go straight to Manchester United and be a star.
Look,
Wow, that's just not.
Raúl Jiménez went to Atlético Madrid, and it didn't work out so well. No, and then he went to Benfica and he recovered, and then the move to Wolves happened, and then bam, it just blew up. No, so it's like you said, you got a lot of point there. I mean, it has to be very careful, the selection, but at this stage in 2025, there has to be more over there. No, and it doesn't matter where they go; they just have to land over there somewhere.
Yeah, 100%. And really quickly, also, and Carrillo, who's in Feyenoord too. That's another one I should add right there that went over the winter. Lizzy, let's go to you here. Our final topic. Wrap things up in the next 5 minutes. So we have 6 games left for each team. Obviously, not 6 games total. That would be weird. In Liga MX, at this point in the season, who would you say that the favorite is for the Liga MX title? I'm worried we're all going to say the same answer here, but all right.
I don't know. Here's my thing. I don't know. If last tournament proved anything, Liguilla changes everything. I mean, Club America has won it, dominating the regular tournament. Come into Liguilla, won. Played a terrible regular tournament. Entered Liguilla, won. You know what? Okay. I'm not setting expectations for anything this year. I choose to pick no favorite, and I want to be pleasantly surprised.
Well, I'm saying it's the easy one. I think it's Club America. Maybe there's a recency bias after watching them last night too, and I was like, I felt like yesterday was a turning point. Even they've been doing decent this season, not like as if they've been playing poorly, but yesterday felt like a turning point for that team, for that crowd. With like doing everything that like Club America fans want from that team to play pretty, to score a bunch of goals, to impress, especially over a team like Chivas. I mean, Zendejas has been great. I have no idea why he wasn't part of the U.S. men's national team roster. That's very confusing to me. Fidalgo's looking good. Brian Rodriguez also like looking. It's just, and also like if with Malagon too, if we're going back to him, I thought that his form was a little off last season. I had my questions about him last season. Not saying he was bad. He had some questionable games, but I think he's been in better form this season. He's looking good. So I don't know. I think it has to be them. It's it's too easy of an answer. I don't know. Nayib, your thoughts? Or Lizzy, were you about to say something?
Right. I don't mean to, but I don't know if it's that easy anymore, because I don't think their focus is 4-time consecutive winner. I think right now they have a bone to pick with CONCACAF, and so if it happens to be at the same point and they're thinking about rotating players, they will for the for Liga MX and not for CONCACAF. I think they've proven all they needed to in Liga MX. Now the hunt is international tournaments. So that, I think, if anyone were to hold them back from anything, I think it's this like idea of other tournaments. That's why I don't think it's that necessarily straightforward for them this time. Because also they already made history con el tricampeonato. Like they're not. I'm not saying they're not looking to make more, but it's, I don't think, a priority at the moment.
Yeah, Nayib, your thoughts? Yeah,
I'm gonna say something crazy.
Okay,
this is it. Okay,
yes.
Look, in the last 6 months, the Mexican figure in soccer or in all the world, the most impeccable one, or in my opinion, the one that has been the top, is not a player. It's been Efraín Juárez, a coach. what he did with
Ooh.
Atlético
Yes.
Nacional
Nacional.
and
Yes.
winning the
Yes.
cup and the league, he showed capabilities that were very, very llamativos. So this is a coach that can play defensively, can play offensively. He has a really good school of thought, I think, as a manager. He was in Belgium with Ronnie Deila, won a league title in MLS, also as an assistant in New York City. The guy is a winner, and when the press conference of introduction happened in Seoul, it's really rare when Mejia Baron is one of the
Right.
most, is one of the fathers of Mexican football, I would say, got really like ilusionado. Like he said, I saw his training session. It's one of the best that I've ever seen in my life. Everything's going to be fine in Pumas now that he's here. And this guy, he's a winner. And like Lizzy says, if Pumas gets in as eighth or seventh, watch out with Pumas. Watch out with Pumas because if Funes Mori starts scoring goals, if the defense kind of gets it together, they got this Padilla and the goalkeeping that came from Athletic Bilbao, so it's a good goalkeeper, a good prospect. Watch out with Pumas. I think, I mean, it's that sort of story that typically happens in the MX where you just don't see it coming. I think with Efrain Juarez, I really think that there's a potential at least to go deep and to make something. But we'll find out if my interpretation is right or it's just totally wrong.
There's a lot of interesting pieces there too. Carrasquilla is also another interesting
Yeah.
piece. Every time I see Rubalcaba, and maybe I have a bias because he's a Mexican American kid from Southern California, but sometimes I see, and he had some special moments like in the first friendly for Mexico in January. Every now and then I see him play, and I'm like, all right, this kid might be something special here. I wouldn't be surprised if he was to really step up now, that especially since Huerta is no longer in the roster. I think that's an interesting shout. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. Although it
Yeah,
would
and
be
I feel
pretty funny.
Seul's gonna be popping. Now that
Yeah,
Efrain is there, the fan base is gonna get very behind them. If they keep getting wins, the stadium is gonna get packed, and it's not gonna be easy to go to Seul.
yeah.
And they're also a potential opponent for Inter Miami down the road.
Yes.
If they were to win that series, nothing stops them. And I don't mean because Inter Miami is this like team to beat, because Monterrey did
Yeah,
it
Lizzy, but on
last year.
paper is if you put Miami and Pumas,
Yeah,
Miami wins it.
right. But I'm
Yeah.
saying I think if Pumas were to be Miami, the confidence that
Yeah.
you get and the ego boost that cannot be taken for granted for these players to say that they did that, I think they take that into Liguilla and run. I think the fuel that you get from that, unmatched.
Yeah.
Unmatched.
Unmatched.
I like it. I
So
like
let's
it.
see.
I like it.
And look, and they're playing back. Well, first they gotta
Yeah,
close the
they
deal
both
with
got
They're playing tonight.
for
They're
sure.
playing tonight. They're
against
playing
I think
tonight.
Alajuelense, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
they're up.
so if
They
they
are.
beat Alajuelense, they'll play against Vancouver.
Yeah.
And Efrain played in Vancouver,
Mm.
so it's a homecoming for him as well.
And Miami
Yeah,
would have to beat LAFC. So still like a couple of things to
Yeah,
happen in the air, but
it's definitely a big
it's a
storyline in Mexican
possibility.
football.
I know
Yeah,
CONCACAF is praying that happens.
yeah, we are recording this just a few hours before Alajuelense take on Pumas. Pumas have a 2-0 aggregate lead, and it'd be quite funny if after all this, we're like, Pumas could do something if they end up losing like 5-0
Oh, and
Whoa.
Inter
tonight.
Miami play Cavalier tonight. They could also lose. They have a 2-0
Yeah, that's true.
lead over
That's true.
Cavalier. And Cavalier gave a great game in Miami last week.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Oof.
I'm hyped about that game. But now that we're not, now
But
that
we
we're
talk
talking,
about
we're talking
Liguilla, we
championship.
talk about Liga MX, so I mean it's Liga MX and Liguilla, no?
There we go.
So
Well, everybody, this is a good chat.
yeah.
Thank you, Nayib. Thank you, Lizzy. Thank you, producer Amy, for uploading the podcast. Thank you to all the listeners. Hopefully, you're all enjoying this now that we're uploading the pods up on YouTube. That is Amy's work right there again. So thank you, Amy, to that, and for her editing some clips and putting some stuff up there. And she asked me to notate some interesting talking points that we brought up. So hopefully I did a good job of that. Maybe I did. We'll see. It's a work in progress. But
It's a work in
thanks,
progress.
everybody. Thanks, everybody. And then we'll see you on the next episode of the Mexican Soccer Show. See y'all around.
Bye.
Bye-bye.